Good morning, California, and good evening, Europe. This is Breakthrough Science with Benjamin again, and I'm happy to have you here for the science news, or the top 7 science news in May so far. So let's dive right into it. There's no watcher right now, but I guess they will come. So let's start with something I explained a little bit the last time in this video. ESA made it possible to look into a huge bunch of data from their Gaia satellite. They basically released 1.3 billion information about 1.3 billion stars. And this information was a Christmas present for astronomers. And we see that already now. So like 2-3 weeks later, there are the first few papers about this topic. So for example, one group discovered the 3 new white dwarfs. White dwarfs are basically dying stars. They move very fast around the universe. And so they are the rest of a sun-like star. So basically, it's very similar to our sun. So these white dwarfs are a new discovery, just like a few weeks after this data was released from Gaia. And another group discovered even something more interesting, I would say, than that, because they figured out that stars, or that our central black hole has dozens of fast-moving stars around it, which are basically accelerated out of our universe, or out of our galaxy, not universe, sorry, out of our galaxy. And this is something very new, because we didn't know that this gravitational effects can really centrifuge stars out of our galaxy. So some very interesting news there. The next thing, the second top news of May so far, is actually a sad thing again. So NASA's Earth observation is a little bit forced downwards. So as you know, the Trump administration has a bit of climate change denial. And this is now represented also in how NASA is treated. So NASA has to reduce their amount of CO2 and methane observation, which is actually the most critical data to understand climate change and to understand what's happening with climate change. So that's a bit sad, but yeah, hopefully it will change soon, and hopefully ESA and the other space agencies can balance that out. Have you ever heard about, so to come to number 3 of the top science news in May so far, have you ever heard about lab-grown meat? If you didn't, I mean, the first lab-grown meat burger patty was already served, or was presented 2013. And now 2 companies in San Francisco are really going big in that. The idea is to take living muscle cells from any organism, to cultivate it, so to cultivate these muscle cells, and to grow them in the lab, to basically not have to kill the animal, but to still produce meat. And 2 companies here in San Francisco are quite big in that, so they are really pushing forward the trend of lab-grown meat. And the news basically are that the US lawmaker is now forcing to get regulations for this meat, because it's really getting serious. And it's an interesting part that this lab-grown meat has gone that far, and might even be a normal part of life in some decades. So that's great news for those who love meat but have a problem with the ethnicity or with the ethics around, not the ethnicity, the ethics around this. So good news for them, or for us. The fourth one is also not entirely new, but it's becoming serious as well. And that's Australia's space agency. So for those of you who follow science news more regularly, Australia announced in September 2017 that they will finally make their own space agency. And it's even a discussion if this space agency, when formed, could be part of the European Space Agency, like Canada is as well. So Yeah. So European Space Agency is growing beyond the borders of Europe. But the really news is there was a big report written and stuff like that, and now it's getting more serious. So when this first announcement was in 2017, I was actually there at the Astronautical Congress in Adelaide, where they announced it. People were still very unsure. How will it look like? What will it be? But now these things are really coming together, and the agency is on its way. So I'm not sure what the exact date will be, but something like July. Number 5, a new launch from NASA. I know I have an awful amount of number of space research news, but they just hit me, and I think they are super interesting. So I hope that you agree with me on that. So this new launch, 5th of May, was InSight. It was actually happening here in California from the airbase here. And InSight is a new launch to Mars. So it's basically a lander on Mars, which will observe the internal structure of Mars a little bit and the way Mars is behaving inside. So the internal values, if you want. So it has like seismometers on board to measure the movement of the Earth. It has temperature sensors on it, and this all should understand the geology of the whole planet a little bit better. Curiosity, so the rover, which is already going around there for a while, is also or was also or should have been also able to measure seismometric activity and stuff. But sadly, you always need 2 sensors for that to balance out which one is really seismometric, so which one is really coming from the Earth and which one is just the air. And basically the one of the 2 broke, so they could not really do anything with the data. And it sadly broke directly after landing, so that was a little bit a shame. And this is not the only news about a new Mars lander. There was the announcement that the first flying drone basically will be sent to Mars by 2020 from NASA as well. So a drone is, of course, awesome because you can fly over the environment. You can generate a lot of pictures. You can generate a lot of data. The only problem with that, so the only problem with having a drone flying over is the low air pressure they have. So I mean, like the Earth atmosphere is 10 times more dense than the Martian atmosphere. To keep something rotating in the air is much harder. So, but scientists and engineers here at NASA figured a way out by counter-rotating rotor plates, and I'm really curious to see what this rover brings to us, or this drone brings to us. Okay, enough space for today. Let's go to number 7, and this one is an awesome one. Neuroscientists successfully transferred memory from one sea snail to another sea snail. And they did so just by transferring RNA. If you don't know what RNA is, you should really check out a video. I will post it in the comment section. I just made it recently about what RNA, DNA, and proteins are and how they play a role for the origin of life, because this are like the most important biomolecules out there. But back to this publication, they managed to transfer memory just by transferring this specific molecule from one snail to another snail. How did they do that? They had 2 sea snails. One was trained, one was a wildling. And the trained one was trained to electroshocks. So basically conditioned to these electroshocks. And the wild one got an RNA injection from the trained one. And after that, the wild one was conditioned as well, even though it never received an electroshock before. So quite interesting news, could change our understanding of memory a lot. And I'm curious what will come out of that. Cool. So the last one, number 8. And this is something also directly related to my Origin of Life series. As you know, if you watch my How Was the Earth Formed or How Old is Earth video, Earth was hit very back in their toddler year, or in its toddler years, by a second planet almost the size of Mars called Theia. And as they hit, they formed moon. They formed the moon. But they also apparently formed a bunch of other meteorites, moons, small objects flying around Earth. And these small objects are still like huge. These small objects basically hit back to Earth because they were not big enough to stay in orbit. So they hit back to Earth. And when they did so, when they hit Earth again, they formed, most likely, or they helped to form our continents. So our continental plates are basically leftovers of old moons. And this is like, if that's true, I mean, there are pros and cons about this theory, but this is like an awesome idea. And whenever you say from now on, oh, you're from another continent, it feels like you're from another planet, it might be true. Kind of. Anyhow, these were my science news for beginning of May. I will be back in 2 weeks with more and with the rest of what's happening in May. So for that, stay curious, and I hope to see you again whenever that's finished. See you guys.